这个就是在录的状态了。
对，然后结束的时候按一下这个。
上的我去等我的了，没问题，我去等我的了。那个嘉宾在喊啊。
Everyone.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And now I'm gonna share my screen. You see my screen?
Actually, I cannot see your screen, so please try again.
Okay.
Yeah. And let's wait for others to come in. Okay.
What about now?
This stream has ended.
Wait.
Doesn't work. Maybe Gatka, can you share the screen for Gabriel so that others can see the slides?
Another slide.
have shared my screen. Anyone can see it?
Yes, I did that.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, let me do it. I think there's something wrong with this call today. Because some of our audiences told us there's something wrong, so maybe let's wait for another few minutes.
Hello, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, I can. So let's get started.
Okay, before we start, I have some tips on how to use this voice channel for you. I'm not sharing my screen. You can click the watch stream button and then you will see my screen. And you can see that it's on the top of the left of your screen. And if you want to see the PowerPoint while chatting on the other channel, you can click the pop out button in the bottom right corner of the screen. If you have any technical questions, please contact our staff on the general chat channel. Hello everyone, welcome to our AMA. I'm today's host, Gabriel. I'm also the campus ambassador of Bim Studio. Today we're going to talk about possibilities to express diversified identities. Before the AMA starts, we have a gift for you. All attendees of today's AMA will get a chance to receive a poll, which is the proof of attendance protocol. All you need is to follow our Twitter, attend our AMA, and get your crypto wallet ready. Since we need to collect your crypto wallet addresses to distribute polls, if you don't have one, please register for it. We recommend MetaMask or newcomers. Our staff will send you a tutorial. You can follow the steps and get one. Now let the AMA begin. The event will include 3 parts. First will be the speakers sharing, and then we will have a panel discussion, and the final part will be Q&A. Feel free to discuss on the general chat channel, and we will give speaking permission to everyone once the Q&A session begins. Today, we are very honored to invite 2 visual artists, Katie and Xavier. We will talk about how to maintain a balance between reality-based and bound imagination, and analyze possibilities of art communities in the metaverse. First of all, let me give a brief introduction about Bim Studio. Bim refers to build exciting adventures in metaverse. We formed an elite design team composed of excellent artists and designers from all over the world. We are committed to exploring brand new ways for digital natives to interact with information, space, and each other. You can go through our tweets to see the projects we have done. We have formed partnerships with the most popular metaverse platforms such as the Sandbox and the Decentraland. We are the approved artists of the Sandbox. So if there is any landlord or brand or IP holders, you are more than welcome if you like to establish your presence in the metaverse. Currently, we are holding the Gliderverse Metaverse Design Contest and still calling for entries now. Participants are divided into two divisions, student and professional. Each division has 4 categories: fashion, visual, product, and space. The awards include generous bonus, exclusive NFT trophy or medal, Angel's Pitch Day, and extensive showcases. And the Metaverse Award ceremony and exhibition will be held in Decentraland in August. Please refer to our pinned tweet or Medium for more information. Currently, we are recruiting campus ambassadors, and I'm one of the campus ambassadors. If you want to get first-hand information about Web3, to communicate with industry experts, and to participate in community building, to have a higher platform to show your ability and to seize the opportunities of the metaverse, becoming a Bim campus ambassador is an opportunity you can afford to miss. If you are interested in it, feel free to contact us, and you can also scan the QR code on the screen to sign up. At the same time, Bing, the word itself means bridge. In this case, we expect to be the first stop for everyone newcomer to the crypto world, not only creators, but anyone who holds passion for the new world. We aim to build a cutting-edge community. We hope our members to be critical, independent, and rebellious, which are crucial qualities on Web3. We will provide frontier information, analysis, and insights of the industry, build a Bing wiki, a knowledge base where every community member can have access and is encouraged to enrich the content. Of course, we will hold more activities like this AMA. Feel free to let us know what subject you are interested in, and if you would like to be the guest speaker to share something with us. If you are an expert in certain area which overlaps with Web3 or may have interaction with the crypto world, do not hesitate to send us a DM. And now let's go to the guest speakers sharing. In the next hour, you will get plenty of good for thought. The first speaker is Katie. And our guest speaker is Katie, visual artist, writer, and professor at the School of Visual Arts. Her ongoing practice in interdisciplinary installation art, performance, and the socially engaged community ritual. Today, and now let's welcome Katie, right? Katie, are you there? Katie? So, I think Katie is not currently online, and um, then let's move to Xavier. Are you there? Okay. So I will introduce you first. I'll wait a second. Xavier is a visual artist and senior lecturer at Kingston School of Art. He worked with international agencies for global brands, including Seat, Nike, and his practice explores the possibilities of technologies such as VR, AR, and AI to create narratives around social commentary. And now let's welcome Xavier.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, as Gabriel said, I am a visual artist, and I've been working with virtual reality for quite some time. I've been reviewing and using the work of the Spanish artist called Goya as a way to find parallelisms between the society that was 200 years ago and today. So, long story short, I research on one hand the rationality of human beings and how through these immersive technologies we can make the audience be inside a world that is completely immersed, and then trick the senses to make them feel like they are in other worlds. On the other hand, I am very interested in the metaverses and all the different possibilities that these can offer, from new ways of working, new ways of learning, new ways of networking, and new ways of communicating between people that is all over the world, but mainly with this feeling of presence, which is kind of the main difference with the other iterations that we had, the other iterations of the internet that we had in the past. So for me, there's a lot of opportunities in this new wave of digital. I don't know how many revolutions there already happened, but this convergence between immersive technologies or mixed realities, and then all the power of Web3 and all the decentralized internet, and then as well with the other layer on artificial intelligence as well. So as a lecturer during the pandemic, I experimented with some of these virtual environments that in order to give my lectures with my students. I had a very big problem that the students were in their homes like everyone else during lockdown, and then the engagement was very low with everything that was screen based like this. So nobody would have the webcam on. They would not engage in the activities, and it was very
爸爸，
bad.
你那个东西声音小点。
What I did is to I started a pilot that what we did is to deliver these sessions in virtual reality using Mozilla Hubs. And that is something that I found very interesting, not only because the engagement improved a lot, but as well it brought a lot of different questions about identity and how the students behind an avatar, they felt much more comfortable interacting with other people without having to show their webcams and so on. And then on the other hand, it allowed us, for example, one of the things that we asked the students is to build their own virtual studios with Mozilla Spoke, and that was as well another kind of identity. So the space, the design that they were doing in their space, which they could upload their work, and we would held tutorials in there and so on. So that would be another part of their identity. The space that they created was part of their identity as well. And then what worked very well is how all these people can gather together in those spaces and have this feeling of presence. And that was very, very, very interesting, because all the metaverses, what they allow you to do is to have the feeling that you are in a space with other people. And that raises a lot of questions and raises a lot of opportunities on, for example, equality of opportunities and accessibility to networking. So, for example, if we have a possibility of feeling that I am in a space with other people, that allows artists that maybe don't live in big cities to be part of those art communities. So there is a big potential on building art districts that are not linked to a physical space. And that makes, in terms of somebody that doesn't have the privilege to live in such an expensive city like London or Singapore or Hong Kong or Tokyo or New York, it allows the possibility of being in a community without having to need all that money that involves living in those places. As well, in an educational point of view, it opens a lot of opportunities, particularly for design and art degrees, to have an iteration and improvement on what online learning is. So currently it's Zoom or Discord, and it's very text based, and then as well with recorded videos and so on. But it really, the fact that you can feel that you are in a space with your classmates is a big step forward in the feeling of feeling part of a group, part of a community, and then the learning experience is much better. It's not going to substitute everything. No, it's just another step forward that improves that experience massively. And in terms of working, is exactly the same. After the pandemic and with all these technologies that we have today, I think that we need to rethink the office space. What is the point on going to a place when what we are all going to do is to be in front of our laptops? So there is a big opportunity as well to work in a different way, that every time to time we need to gather in a space with our colleagues so that creativity flows and these connections are made in a better way, much better than Zoom or much better than Microsoft Teams. But on the other hand, we don't need to go to the office every day or twice a day or something. So it's another step forward in the pace that has been building up for a very long time already. And now we have that opportunity to change the way we work and to change the way we relate to people that have same interests between us. And there are a lot of interesting questions that we need to think about it urgently, which is climate change. So if we can get rid of a lot of the commuting to work and a lot of the waste that is created around the offices, and if we can decluster the cities and spread throughout the different countries much more, and if we don't need to move that much to travel for work, because most of those travels for work, for conventions and fairs, and sometimes there's people that just travels to have few meetings. It is true that it's not the same having these conversations like these in a 2D environment. It's not the same as being in person. And it's not the same being in virtual reality as being in person, but it gets closer. It gets closer to that. And we need to tackle the problem of climate change and be more efficient in the way we work and the way we learn. And one of these ways is to travel less. And yes, this is kind of the main areas that I've been exploring, not only in my art practice, but as well in the ways that we behave, working, learning, and networking. So yeah, I think that's a little introduction on the topics that I'm more interested in.
thank you, Xavier, and I think your sharing must be insightful to all the attendees. And now let's welcome our next speaker, Casey. Casey, are you there? Our equipment, and now let's move to our next session, and that will be a panel discussion. So this part was actually for two of our guests, but now we only get Xavier. So are you there, Xavier?
Yes, I am.
So I got some questions for you, and for you too, actually. But it seems that only you can respond right now. So the first one is, what are the implications and breakthroughs of blockchain and XR technology developments for the future of art video creation?
Well, okay. There are a lot of possibilities that are opened in this matter. So on one hand, as I said before, there is a possibility of building new communities around these metaverses, right? So let's start talking about the metaverse. So on one hand, we have a lot of people that are already gathering in those spaces, as you said, in Sandbox or in Decentraland or something, right? So on one hand, that is a very interesting platform to communicate with people that is possibly younger than us, and they are very used to those spaces. Things that we might find kind of weird, which is not, but that we are not that used to it. Those generations are more used to gather and communicate in those spaces. On the other hand, the Web3, it allows you, for artists, is a very interesting possibility that democratizes and opens a lot of ways that artists can monetize their art, right? So
Yeah.
the idea of the artist in the studio that paints or that makes the sculptures and so on, they are not over, but there are a lot of artists that they work primarily with digital media. So the fact that digital media is per se infinite, you can replicate it as many times as possible. From a capitalistic point of view, it's a problem because there's no scarcity. So the fact of adding some scarcity to something that can be replicated endlessly makes collectors be more interested in collecting digital works. So these are two very, very interesting opportunities for this. It raises a lot of questions regarding because everything, all of this is from an economic perspective and from a very capitalistic perspective. So the fact that there's less, it makes it more desirable, and therefore I'm going to pay more money for it. I think that there's the opportunity as well to rethink what kind of value do we give to certain things that maybe that more people can access to it. I'm thinking, for example, in the case of Decentraland is all good. However, I have a little problem with the speculation, the real estate speculation that they are replicating from the real world into a digital world. So they are using the same mechanisms of buying land that is finite, that there's a scarcity of land, and then the value of that land just increases because there's more people that wants to buy it. I am more interested in opening access to as much land as possible, because and that's why we can integrate and include more people in those spaces. Because if everything is about exclusivity, we're going to get the same problems that we have today in the real world. That is a lot of speculation in real estate, a lot of speculation in the art world that is not that much about the art, but about the speculation of investments in art. There are a lot of paintings that are in physical paintings that are in big warehouses in tax haven countries like Luxembourg, for example. There's massive warehouses with loads of art in crates that nobody is enjoying that art. Nobody's looking at that art, but there are a lot of people, a lot of investors that they are buying those art pieces, those artworks, just for the sake of making more money. And it's all good to make money. Don't get me wrong. We all want to make money. However, at what expense? So if we want to create metaverses that are exclusive, that raises a lot of questions. It raises a lot of opportunities to do stuff that is more accessible for people, and we can still make money out of it, and that's all very good. I do not agree that much on replicating problems that we have in the physical world and bringing them into the digital world or into the different metaverses. That's something that I think that we need to reflect on, because from an economic perspective, if instead of being exclusive, we are inclusive and we bring down the
爸爸，你声
prices,
音小一点。
we give a much bigger audience access to these spaces, you're going to make more money rather than being very exclusive and having very expensive items. So yeah, I think that, and from particularly for the younger generation, I want them to be able to access those spaces, and for the artists to be able to benefit from all the possibilities of the different metaverses and the different the blockchain and so on. But for example, minting an artwork with Ethereum is terribly expensive for a young person, and that's something that I think we need to reflect. That's why, particularly, I think that Tezos is a much more interesting, and it has more potential in the future, because the gas price, it uses almost like a 0.5% of the energy that Ethereum uses, and it's more inclusive, and it allows more people to get started with NFTs and the Web3. I think that there's a big gold rush that with what happened with Solana, with Luna and other cryptocurrencies that they have problems, and now we are in the middle of a kind of a crash, but I'm sure that it will come back again. But I think that we need to learn from all of this and to get a more open, inclusive, much more respectful with the environment, in terms of how do we use those blockchains, how do we use the metaverses that are linked to blockchains, And it's a very big opportunity for everyone to network in this new iteration of the internet without being so harmful for the environment, and in terms of economics, to make it cheaper so more people can access to it. And then by having a bigger audience with lower prices, we're going to make more money rather than smaller audiences with really high prices.
Thank you. And just like we just said, the current metaverse is basically like with the scarcity and the resource is limited. And what if everybody could have access to metaverse and there is no limitation and the resource is finite and everyone could be a creator, and what will be more exciting if all this happen? Like, what could we expect to see, like, in the future exhibition viewing experience? And what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it opens a lot of opportunities for a lot of things. Something that I'm particularly interested in is the possibility of creating new worlds and simulating new worlds. And as I said in my introduction, in my talk, I think that the fact that people can design their own world to express themselves and to show their art in different ways, that is a fantastic opportunity to be able to see how people would like to design their worlds, to visualize their worlds without any limitations. There are a lot of things that are happening now, like simulations. Uh, so NVIDIA was showing when they were presenting the Omniverse, and they were showing how they have been working with different brands with creating digital twins, creating very, very, very hyper realistic simulations of how things would behave before creating the before turning this simulation into the real world. And that's very interesting. That is very interesting, and it allows the opportunity to make more efficient world. Our physical world has to become more efficient because, as I said, we're in the middle of a climate emergency, and it will allow us to think and to design and to test stuff that is hyper realistic, and then come up with good solutions at a much faster speed rather than building it into the real world and then testing it. So there are a lot of opportunities. And then in a much more imaginative and creative point of view, we can create worlds that they don't have the limitations of the physical world. We can fly, we can play with gravity, we can become massive, we can become very small, we can go to the other side of the world by crossing a portal, we can we can change our bodies and experiment with virtual bodies with different avatars that can help us empathize a little bit more with other genders, or I don't know. There's a lot. What I'm more interested is that it opens the possibility of a lot of questions and a lot of very rapid prototyping. That if we use that wisely, it can be very beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, that sounds really fantastic, and in that ideal world. And in order to achieve what we have discussed above, what do you think that is the biggest challenge for visual designers to create on Web3?
Well, I suppose that the main challenge is that if they are aware of Web3, so it needs, so this is in the making, right? And this is what it's exciting about this. However, there's a lot of young people that they don't know when they think about making art or designing. The percentage of young people that considers doing using technology to create and to build their artistic practice is still very small. I think that there's still a long way to go to bring technology and art closer from a younger age. That's one of the challenges. The second challenge is, as I said, is getting used to these platforms and being able to build your own audiences, but having because you can do that on Instagram right now, right? But you're just posting and you comment and so on. But there are other opportunities to actually meet the audience in that space, and there is a fantastic possibility as well of mixing the physical world with the digital world even more, and that is a whole new area that can be explored further. The good thing is that now it's easier than ever for everyone who is interested in the Web3 and design and art and so on, like you guys, that you are hosting these AMA, and there's loads and loads and loads of new communities that are building these relationships, and it feels a bit like the beginning of the internet in the 90s, not the beginning in the 70s, but it feels like this explosion of access for a lot of people, and people sharing resources and helping each other, and it's thriving. It's a community that is thriving, and they are willing to help each other, and that's very very positive. So if somebody that is a designer or an artist that wants to get into the blockchains and into the metaverses, there is more access than ever existed, and that's good. The most important thing is, how do we keep that spirit? Because we went from, in the 90s, we went from almost a idealistic idea of the internet, of sharing resources, and Wikipedia is a very good example of it, and it evolved into massive corporations like Facebook and Google and Apple and so on, and I don't think that the lack of plurality on these corporations at the end of the day has
你自己想想
been that positive.
我也在想呢，你自己想你的，我想
So
我的。
we need to keep the internet plural. We need to keep the internet diverse, because and particularly in these spaces, it is very exciting to see people from underrepresented countries, particularly in the African continent or South America, that they usually don't have that much voice in this space. And you can see all the amazing work that they are doing. But the most important thing is that we have to, all the community, we have to keep those voices heard, and not when the next Silicon Valley massive corporation comes in, just wipes everything out, and then we just keep listening to the same voices that are usually white, male, and middle class.
Yeah, so there are very there are some for the creators to get into the Web3. So I've been following your creations. So my favorite one is some followers. So when you are creating this pieces of art, and what challenges have you met, and how did you overcome them?
So Sun Followers is a VR experience that is based on an etching of Goya. Sun Followers, what happens is that I'm just going to summarize a little bit what is it. So you start the experience and you are placed in a field surrounded by sunflowers. So the sunflowers are like cutouts of cardboard, very colorful, very childish, very cute in a way. And what happens is that you see a big sun that is in front of you, and then you look around, and the difference with how the sunflowers behave is that the sunflowers usually follow the sun. But in this case, you realize you're a sunflower as well. And then because of the normal exploration, just looking left and right and up and down, you're exploring that space, you're not following the sun. And what happens is that the sun starts following you. That's something that the sun doesn't like. And this has connotations of the relations with power and the relations of climate change as well. So the reaction of the sun that is not followed is almost of revenge. And that sun starts growing and becoming hotter. And at the end, it burns all the sunflowers, including you. So this is a piece I'm particularly happy about because of its simplicity. So the main process with that artwork was that we were adding a lot of interactions, and we could do this and that and this and that, and then it was more of a process of, after building something complex, then starting just getting rid of interactions and of things that were not actually necessary to the story, to the idea. And it was, instead of adding more stuff, was the opposite, was just excluding things. No, let's get rid of this, let's get rid of that, and simplifying until the point that it was mainly the look around and how the sun was following you, and how this very, very little interaction was the core of the idea. Usually with some VR artworks, there is a bit of too much complication. Sometimes they are too complex. And what I was particularly happy about it is this process of simplifying and being more true to the core of the idea.
Yeah, I understand. And behind this creation, there will be I assume that there will be a long process of how your mind is, what is happening in your mind state. You think about something like simplifying and regarding just ignore all the things that is not necessary, and just how did you get this idea, and what inspired you?
Well, I mean, this idea, I've been studying the Spanish artist Goya, and this idea is part of a series of artworks that I've done with video, with virtual reality, several of them. So it's one piece out of, I think it's 9 other pieces that I've been researching, reviewing, and studying about the work of Goya, particularly his etchings on social commentary about the Spanish society in the late 17th century and 18th century and early 19th century. So this has been another step in this deep research that I've been doing for almost 8 years.
All right. I see that Katie's back on our channel, right, Katie? Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you finally.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay, let me introduce Katie for us. Actually, Katie is a visual artist and writer, and her ongoing practice in disciplinary installation art and performance and social engagement in community ritual. And now, I'd like to welcome Katie to give us her speech.
Okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I am going to share my screen. Yeah. All right. Okay. So it looks like, can everyone see my keynote?
我刚刚都想好问题了。你说当一个初学者，你有什么建议对于
Can you hear me?
I see you are sharing your screen, but I'm not sure whether others could see that.
Yes,
So I
I can
see
see
your
it.
slides. Please
Okay.
go on. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, yeah, I'm sorry I missed the first part of the talk, and what I have to share might be a bit parallel to the discussion, but I really wanted to focus in on this idea of staying grounded in reality as we create a bold vision for the future. I'm new to this idea of Web3, but I understand that, it's the basic principle is this concept of decentralization, where we have an internet where there's a lot of surveillance and control. We have big companies, Amazon, Facebook, kind of mining the space for all the resources and controlling a lot of the traffic. Whereas Web3 is like a new tier, right, where we have decentralization. We have ownership of our own work as artists. We have this ability to read and write, and we have more privacy, essentially. So I just included this little graphic for people like me that might be new to this concept of Web3. And I also, when we think about imagination, I personally feel that Web3 is a very speculative concept. When I talk to my friends who are more deep into the NFT game, it's still a sort of vision that's growing. It's a web this concept of a web, I think, is very relevant. If we imagine this, that, you know, it starts with a few threads and it grows as more people are drawn to this sort of under-regulated space, getting into the NFT game, kind of taking their power and agency back as artists. We can sort of draw away from Web 1 and into Web 3. So this talk is going to talk about art as a decolonizing force. You know, I think we're very much coming from an age of colonizer and colonize, and the artist is often, you know, not really reaping the benefits of their own labor, their own imagination, their own content. You know, for instance, if you make paintings, you know, you have to put them on Facebook, right? Immediately, Facebook technically owns those images and is also, you know, selling your attention and every ounce that you put into that space to advertisers. So this is an artist I really like that kind of introduced me to that. Her work is very much kind of gliding on this utopian vision of what can Web3 be if we build it from this place of everyone is equal, right? There is no elite, there is no haves and have-nots, and we all enter and sort of hold our power as agents of the future. So this is the AI spaceship. You know, I think the internet very much is like a teleportation system where we're able to access all this information and the whole globe in 1 second. I also, you know, my talk is going to highlight how I feel that the internet is a bridge to a sort of capacity we have within when using our higher psychic faculties, our intuition. We can actually tap into that without the internet. And we can begin to like sort of merge our human capacity for things like ESP and remote viewing and decolonizing spaces, that web that already exists in the sort of ethereal realm, with the internet, which is ethereal, but, you know, has a lot of real ramifications and a lot of capital and power is swirling in that space, as we know. So building a better tomorrow, you know, this is an artist I really love. Speaking, a lot of my talk is going to sort of speak to this idea of magic and using our imagination to kind of weave a new world. So I wanted to highlight Princess Nukia, who, you know, since I've known her, I live in New York City, so I happen to have the privilege of kind of rubbing elbows with the artists before they become these big sensations, you know, and now I see Princess Nukia. She's a singer, it's a rapper, and also a sort of magical shapeshifter. This is her most recent album, and like, you know, she put something out on the internet. She's very much an influencer, and you know, has thousands and thousands of people around the world sort of tuned into, let's say, her channel, her presence. I believe she's a truly magical being. I actually sat with her one time at a workshop she did, and just like a personal anecdote, I was pregnant at the time and she looked at me and like squirted milk out of her nipple. I was like, wow, I don't know how she did this. This person is not, you know, not bearing children or pregnant. And I just was very convinced of her power, you know, and I think when we live in this internet world, sometimes we see this sort of hologram of people and we don't always experience the tangible line in this talk. As we're building these virtual worlds, how do we stay embodied and create a meaningful life that's balanced? For me, the goal, you know, the role and the goal of artists is to make the revolution irresistible. So I think in order to create a truly decolonized space, you know, we need to have people who have been marginalized in the greater discourse taking on leadership roles, whether that's a creator of content like Princess Nokia, some of the other artists I'm going to look at, or creating kind of platforms where artists can share and support each other and create sort of avenues of resources that are flowing into different areas, right? So into the third world, into bank accounts, right, of people living below poverty. I think artists often take a lot of risks to make this work, and we don't always see the return in our lifetime. So this is just some art. A lot of this I kind of did take from the internet, and that is a space I'm navigating both as a teacher and as a creator. And I just want to bring some, I guess, more ancient wisdom into the discussion. So a big archetype I want to look at is the Centaur. The Centaur is half human and half animal. So we can associate it with the myth of the horse archer. If we have any Sagittarius, that's the Western astrological sign associated with the Centaur, as well as the wounded healer. So the Centaur is known as a magical being. I think of the Centaur and the wounded healer archetype as very much in alignment with artists' role in society in general. Within mythology, which is also a space that needs to be sort of re-envisioned and reimagined for a more egalitarian future, we have the recent Centaur in the sort of Greek pantheon represented as male. Previous to that, the Centaur was female. And there's a lot of, if you go back to the earliest myths in India and Aegean, before they became part of this sort of Western classical myth that we see regurgitated in a lot of our art and also movies and popular culture, we have the Centaur connected to the Amazon women, the moon goddess Artemis Diana, the huntress, and the queen. And again, the Amazons was kind of this peak of matrilineal matriarchal culture, where there was also a sort of clash between the masculine and feminine happening, and almost this power over in the opposite sense. We know that as the Amazon woman. And essentially this archetype is to remind us that we are animal. Often in a sort of global economy, certainly under colonialism, certainly within this, great fiction of race, we often project our animal characteristics onto people of other races, onto other cultures, onto opposite genders or sexual and gender minorities. But this archetype reminds us that we must stay grounded in this reality. And part of this reality is we have to survive. If we are giving our power away to techno-capitalism, right, we're losing the game of survival. So it's very much about wealth and personal power and, being out in the world with your feet on the ground, making your way. So the wisdom of the Centaur comes from the fact that they span two realms. This is both the human and the animal realm. And we think of like the minds, the higher mind sort of channeling this potent stallion energy. And the stallion energy is very vast and versatile in itself. It represents our need for open spaces. For me, Web3 is like the wild, wild west right now. We don't know what happened. We don't know what could happen. It's very speculative. You don't necessarily know what's true or who's true as we're building this space. And, it could disappear. It could be many things. So that sort of openness is where there's potential, there's power to really shift and change. The Centaur needs openness emotionally, mentally, and physically. So I think the danger as we create this web Web3 as that we sort of recreate the same human dramas and power plays and the same hierarchical dominant structures that we know of white male capitalist patriarchy within Web 1, 2, and 3, which is what we've seen happen with the heavy hitters kind of controlling things with global surveillance capitalism. But again, this open space relates to a sort of joy and boundless freedom and optimism that is part of our true birthright as humans. So on the other side of that, as with any sort of goddess archetype, the horse and the centaur also represents the nightmare, a dangerous and terrifying goddess of the night, the wild female rider of the night. It represents this suppressed energy where we're connected to our animal instincts. When you look at things like religion, you see that religion turned our animal instincts against us. So we are investing all this energy in shame over having a body. I think when we have global techno-capitalism, we have something similar happening, but we have our sort of power stripped from us and then sold back to us, where like our impulse to mate or to relate is kind of truncated by these systems where we become addicted to these acts and the need for validation, and our very much animal instincts become sort of perverted through a lot of these channels. So the greater meaning here of the centaur, if you take anything away that sort of, again, underlines the basis of this talk of staying balanced in reality while envisioning a bold, beautiful future, is that we are half human and half animal, and that's a capacity for both rational thought and intuitive awareness. And I will say again that for me, our intuition is the internet within. We need to really understand that we could tap into these greater faculties, particularly as artists. I assume we have mostly artists here as sensitive beings. That's what we're doing when we're creating art. We're downloading things. We're taking a seed of consciousness and we're building, we're building and watering a garden. So, that's the centaur. And then I will say, we've talked about this idea of imagination and the potential, right, to create a more equal future. Let's say an equal future where we all have access. I also think a lot of artists come to art or create art as a sort of escape from traumatic experiences, often the traumatic experience of being in a body, right? We all suffer, we all have trauma in this worldly reality. But I would say there's a caution around, fantasy being dangerous if it becomes disembodied, if it becomes sort of something that is too stuck, that's too regimented, that's too engineered to create one outcome. I think we have to make sure that when we're using our imagination, distinction between imagination and fantasy, for me, fantasy is kind of fixed and imagination is open. So here's some artists I just wanted to share in terms of like intersectional feminist standpoint. We have some work here on the left by the artist Ailey Banks. It's an influencer, just bringing in what for me is this kind of primordial goddess archetype, but updating it and addressing this sort of impact, the violence of patriarchy on female bodies and non-normative bodies. On the right, we have Bunny Michael, who's really recently built a career online in alternative spaces, talking about, we're so glued to our phones, but how do we have a sort of healthy, intentional relationship to these new spaces. So this was a piece of art that's about creating healthy boundaries. Sometimes that's healthy boundaries with our media channels, with our chatting habits. So we can, you really curate our internet spaces and our internet communities so that they are allowing us to feel empowered and grounded, and allowing us to really be an agent of our experience in these spaces, right? Instead of being sort of stripped of our power and having our deepest desires sold back to us, how do we find agency in kind of creating a healthy, holistic, communal, collective experience online that supports everyone? So staying grounded, I think the Centaur, is reminding us we have our 4 feet on the earth. We can really unleash this unbridled, creative, instinctual energy if we do it safely, and we know we have a body. So this is another artist, Janelle Silver. This is something, I just found online, but I really appreciate that, people are addressing these issues of self-care. We've definitely seen the shadow side of virtual spaces, from Facebook to the metaverse. We've seen a rise in suicidal ideation in adolescent girls. We've seen cyberbullying. We've seen genocide in the third world because of social media. So this slide I'm just sharing to show, any artist, however prolific we are, if we're not, feeding the body and staying connected to a real life experience, our creative well will run dry. So just, some examples of how to practice self-care, how to stay in your body, like drink more water, take a walk, meditate, sing and dance, move. I just really appreciated that for kind of highlighting that. I think just that's part of this idea of the internet leading to higher levels of disembodiment. We have to remember that we are not our mind. Our mind can steer the ship, and we could forget we have a body, right? A lot of artists, you might forget to eat. We might forget to drink water, but, eventually we will burn out. So in order to be effective, and we must sort of put on our armor to enter these internet spaces, we must be warriors that are connected in body and mind to be successful in building this future. So I just want to leave with a few more thoughts coming from astrofeminism and the ancient wisdom of astrology. For me, this is very related to this idea of a greater web, like the internet, the ether, the network, the metaverse, that connects us all as human beings, whether we like it or not, that connects us energetically in this higher sort of mind sense of unity consciousness. When I think about the arts and imagination, Venus and Neptune are the key players. So each of these planets we have somewhere in our chart, and it's a way of filtering our experience from when we were born on Earth, and we all have a Neptune, we all have a Venus. Highest expression of Neptune is imagination, arts, fantasy, unconditional love, spirituality, the sort of oceanic consciousness, romantic love, unity consciousness. We think of mermaids, we think of, the deep, deep ocean, and also mist. But the lower expression of that, again, when you get into this shady ground of fantasy, can be escapism, drugs, insanity, delusion. We can really escape into these media spaces where we don't want to be in the body, so we create something new. But we have to kind of create a union in order to do this in a healthy way. So when Neptune is kind of in its lower aspect or in balance. We might be the dreamer with no follow through. We have a lack of structure. We have a lack of boundaries. And two, I think boundaries, we must think about that in the sense of the metaverse and in the sense of surveillance capitalism and our energy and our creative potency as artists. We have to really guard that fiercely, whether we're working in the NFT realm, or we're trying to promote ourselves in different platforms. We have to find the boundaries to generate wealth from our own source of potency and power, or we will lose everything. And that's sort of the lower expression of Neptune. So I just added this slide of Azalea Banks. This was several years ago, but I think this video about Atlantis kind of draws on that greater mythology related to Neptunian consciousness and how we can tap into it to create great works of art, to create this kind of harmony in the internet space, right? Where everyone is equal, everyone shines. So this was just some GIFs from a video she did. And then Venus, I would say, is the other planet that's most connected to particularly this idea of balance. So, the talk is staying balanced in reality, and also calling in that imagination. So Venus is a little bit different. We know her as the goddess of love, beauty, of justice, aesthetics, art, the divine feminine, and romance. This is Cardi B, conjuring, right? This Venus is coming out of the ocean. So Venus emerges from that sea of consciousness, and she is beauty. We think of the sense of arts in the purely aesthetic sense, that is Venus. The lower expression of that can be jealousy, envy, lust, greed, overindulgence. When we think about this balance, like really living in a body, well, sometimes our body is telling us, to eat ourselves. Like there's so many dysfunctions, in terms of our experience of the body, right? A lot of people are having eating disorders or eating themselves to death, or, what we feel in terms of a healthy outlet for our sexuality, it can be very lacking. So Venus, in her detriment, could be using sex appeal as a weapon. It could be using sex to sell. We see that a lot on the internet. Can also be form over function, when we're creating something beautiful, but there's no real substance. It's superficial. It's, essentially propaganda for a cause we don't believe in. So I think that can be very dangerous in the internet, particularly with this rise of influencers and this idea that, again, it's sort of like there are creators of media, and there are consumers of media. As artists, we want to really stay on the creator side and not be kind of following the trends, right? We want to be setting the trends. So I just bring up all this to say that there is a responsibility as artists, and I think we can anchor into a higher wisdom as we move forward in kind of building a new space where there is this sense of harmony, both in the sense of like masculine and feminine energy. We're allowing, access, right, to anyone in the world that maybe, doesn't have the same level of technological literacy or doesn't have that sort of internet access. If we're thinking of these spaces as an open frontier, we really have to welcome and make them accessible. And we also have to be accountable to our own human detriments. So calling on Venus and Mars to do that. That is most of my talk. I have some social media up here if you want to connect with me more on Instagram, Social Suicide. It's my website, Twitter. And that is most of what I wanted to share in terms of staying grounded in reality as we build Web3 and the new future online. Happy to answer questions from here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing and your unique perspective and all the artists that you shared with us. It must be very inspiring for all the attendees. And let's back to the panel discussion. And thank you, Xavier, for your previous about the ideal world and all kinds of your insights behind the sound followers. And now I got a question for Katie, and that would be, what added value can NFTs bring to an artist's work?
Yeah, so I think, before, I'm very much like the generation of artists that have benefited a lot from, social media. But I think if we go back a little bit earlier, we find that, artists have historically been exploited. And if once you are chosen, right, to show your work in a gallery, the gallery is taking half of whatever your sales are. And often, your time and labor and energy and vision just isn't being compensated fairly. So then, the internet, of course, that sort of removed the gatekeepers of the physical art world, institutional spaces from museums to art galleries. But what the sort of NFT gateway is, the ticket, and this first slide that I went back to, is this space allows us to have full ownership of our own copyrights and to market them and to reap the benefits and to create the price points and, to really create our own audience. So I think, it's not like a silver bullet. And I know a lot of artists and myself, I've made NFTs, and it's still a sort of balance of how much time and energy we can put into those spaces to nurture those audiences and those channels. But the idea is that, these are spaces that are free of surveillance capitalism. They are free of gatekeepers, traditional art world gatekeepers, and they are free of anyone sort of eating up the profits of our own labor. So it's very much a revolutionary idea, but it's also a bit speculative, and we have to see how it shakes out. And it will take some real, I really feel like artists have to be, warriors in a sense, to go out there and create that avenue and make it sustainable. It's gonna take work.
Yeah, sure. I'm very, very looking forward to see your NFT and your our work in the Web3. And now we are gonna go into the Q&A section. And is there anyone that had a question for these two guests?
Okay, I have one question for both our guest speakers. Firstly, I would like to thanks for your sharing, and I like Xavier's work, that's the sound followers. I think the XR, the 3D artwork, really give me a sense that I was into that space. That was a different experience when I look into your work, rather than see a picture hanging on a wall or see a picture on website. And that's a very great experience, actually. And I also like Katie's work, that I always admire someone could manage so many bright colors in one piece and make a harmony about them with them. And I would like to ask a question that Since I'm not in America or in Europe, I was wondering how the word like whether metaverse or Web3 was talking around you, and what did you heard, or what kind of atmosphere that in the creator communities that you guys could reach out. Could you share a bit information about this part? Thank you.
Do you want to go first?
Go for it.
Okay, I think that in Europe and the United States, we have a problem of knowing what's going on, and it's our fault of what's going on beyond Europe and the United States. I think that there's some work in South America. It's being more public. So, for example, there's the platform Hikeknunk that comes from Brazil, and that was very, very, very important. I don't know. I'm going to share my screen briefly. Suppose that you are familiar with Hikeknunk, but just wait a sec. Bear with me. So, for example, well, object.com, it's kind of the kind of one of the iterations of right, wait a second. Anyway, I'm not going to share the screen because apparently it's not allowing me to. All right, let's see. Can you hear this? Can you see this? Anyway, I'm not going to show the screen. So yeah. So basically, what we have to say that it's our fault from the United States and Europe not to know more about what's going on beyond our different continents. I know that, for example, in China, they have opened one NFT museum and one crypto museum, which is fantastic. But that's something that I have asked in talks with so-called NFT experts and so on. And I asked, how is China doing, or other Eastern countries? And there's not that much knowledge of that beyond possibly Japan or something. So I think that we need to do our homework, and I think that these cultures that are not Western are very, very, very important, and it's a very good opportunity to all come together in a much better way than the art world has done in the past. So I've seen work from Ghana, from an artist from Ghana, very, very interesting, that he's been doing very well in the NFT scene. There's artists that are working class. For example, Carlos Marcial from Mexico. In Brazil, there's other artists that are gaining quite a lot of traction. But yeah, I think that we need to know more, and I think that with chats like this is a good way of establishing those bridges and getting to know each other better.
Thank you. And what about Katie?
Yeah. So I will just add, my experience. there's certainly a lot of excitement, and I've seen young people, you know, artists that were struggling kind of just pop off in the NFT scene, and, you know, suddenly they're making money. I had a friend who, you know, was just like instantly selling an NFT for $4,000, you know, and there's certainly those success stories, but there's also a lot of misinformation. So it takes a lot of time and energy to navigate. And like I was using this word speculative. I mean, when Facebook began, it was something entirely different than it is now. And so there's always kind of like the pioneers that jump into something. They might kind of take the hit in sort of troubleshooting and the toll it takes, because there are things like scams, or, you know, immediately you see these sort of industries coming up, and then you have people that are kind of riding on that energy, but doing it in a less ethical way. So I've, you know, like I've had people kind of try to get me into you know, there's a sort of main platforms, like OpenSea is a big one, you know, but then people will be inviting you to new platforms, and it's hard to know what the truth is, right? And there can be like literacy issues. I don't feel that I'm that, you know, knowledgeable. And even when I was asking friends, like, what is Web3, you know, it's not that easy to answer whether you are like a computer program or not. You know, there's still this gray area between like the human beings that are really fueling this sort of new experience of, you know, web-based platforms. And then there's also kind of this lawless, unknown territory that can be dangerous too, right? Because we don't know what the truth is if we're just getting started. And I think that's exciting, you know, and it like, I was really birthed into the NFT world from a group of artists that came together, and some of them were making money, and just wanted to share that. And like, I've been in circles where we're educating each other about these issues, even though it can feel overwhelming to get your feet wet. You know, I think that power of the collective is going to eliminate you from sort of being at the mercy of someone else's tall tale or someone else's marketing scheme, you know?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Katie.
Thank you for your answers. And actually, I have one more question, if it's okay. I would like to ask both of you, what do you think of NFT programs like PFP, like the BAYC project, or like Moonbirds, these kind of profile picture programs and pictures NFTs like this? And yeah, I think it's very difficult to define them like artworks. So I don't know whether how artists like you guys would think about these kind of NFT programs. Thank you.
Well, I mean, everything that is creating is good. I wouldn't. So it's. I would relate. I would link it more to a trading card and the culture of collecting trading cards rather than anything else. So, I mean, it's all good. It has its audience. It's fine. Particularly when I'm looking at art, I'm looking for something else. But yeah, I mean, there's been a bit of snobism between some conversations online about if it's art, if it's not art, if it's worth doing it. If it's the number of editions or the one editions, or I think that all the bigger the community, the better. It is true that behind these most famous projects, there are companies, which is okay. But if when I'm looking at a work of art, I would like to scratch and find meanings, and scratch a little bit more and find more meanings, and something that, it's a bit more complete. I don't criticize it. I particularly don't think it's particularly meaningful. But it's interesting, and it has its audience, and it's all good. It's all good. It's more like a trading card, like collecting baseball cards or football cards or whatever. It's okay. It's fine. It's cool.
Okay, thank you. And how about Katie?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll answer as best as I can. Not being familiar with like some of the particulars of what you're explaining, but I think, you have to remember with art in general that it's very subjective, and like, I've had a show and people come in and, they don't look at the art and they go, the lighting's all wrong, So everyone has their own kind of prerogative. And I think part of this idea of this greater utopian notion of decentralized power is that you know what your own unique power is. And, only you get to say whether or not what you're making is art. I think a lot of artists fail when we're sort of too, like, following too closely the market or the trends, and we end up kind of regurgitating what's happening, or like, we want to create the wave. We don't want to ride someone else's wave. So I think we want to educate ourselves, but we want to be careful about making anyone an authority on our value, or they can tell us what we're making is art or not art. Because the truth is, I mean, there's no guarantee of seeing recognition in this lifetime for your work, but the best artists, what they're doing is so unreal and so bold and so new. Often people don't see it as art, So it takes a whole community. It takes the art historians. It takes the art critics. It takes, a whole network to kind of ascribe a greater cultural value to these things that create, the economy. But I think we need to trust our gut instinct when we're creating. And then, the reality check is, okay, fitting into a system where we can kind of call back the resources and sell our work in some way. And that can be a slippery slope. But I think be open to trying new things, and also be cautious. And yeah, just a reality. Again, it's like a lot of people have said that, the NFT world and all these new platforms are not diverse enough. And it's a lot of like, money laundering, or sort of like ways to hide money and play with money. And you get like that, like trading cards with like young men that have too much money, and they want to they don't want to pay taxes off of it. So there's a lot of ways we can also sort of pick apart the NFT scene and criticize it for the same business as usual. But I think we get out of that by being open to new possibilities and really trusting ourselves. So yeah, that's how I would respond.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. What about others? Does anyone have any questions to ask our speakers? Okay, then Special thanks to Xavier and KT, and thanks everyone for participating in our AMA. Our staff will send a feedback form to the group. Please fill in, and we appreciate your suggestions, ideas, and future engagement in our community a lot. Stay tuned if you are interested. See you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Cheers.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Katie. Bye.
Take care.
Mm-hmm.